Today on Mike in Mono. Pumps, wood boilers, pipe and pipe fittings, hydronics, all that and more today on Mike in Mono. Let's go. Welcome back to Mike in Mono. Today we're going to do another video for you. I hope you guys like it. It's kind of the second part to the previous video. In that video we kind of talked a little bit in general about wood boilers and some basic, just high level stuff, and then we did a little walkthrough of my system, you know, showing the boiler, some of the components, pumps. If you haven't got a chance to see that video, we're going to link that here, and go check that out, and maybe this may make a little bit more sense. But today we're going to talk more about how do you hook these things up. Generalized, you know, this isn't going to be a be-all end-all perfect for every situation. I'm going to give you some information, things that you can kind of look at, things to maybe watch out for, and, you know, maybe how you can implement, you know, wood boilers with domestic water heating situations. So we hope you guys look forward to that. I hope you like it, and we'll get started. All right. We're going to start off with what I would consider a conventional open system. And open, we're talking about not a closed loop. As you can see, a lot of your outdoor wood boilers, they're vented. Most that you'll see are vented, so that it's right here. So this vessel in here, you have water in here, and it's just open to atmosphere. Now, this is going to be just for heat only. So all we're going to do is be trying to heat our house. Basically, the boiler is going to try to make, you know, you have aquastat, let's say 180 degree water. The boiler is controls, maybe a little bit different, but basically it's going to control itself however it decides. Opening a natural draft, opening an air damper up here, or most of the time it's going to be turning on a combustion fan, just blowing air in. So right now what I'm showing you is just the vessel of water. Inside you have a firebox, and here's some firewood, and you know, it's burning in here, and yeah, it's got, comes out a flue pipe somehow, maybe like that. All right, but basically once the water gets to temperature, you want to start moving that water around. So here's your pump. Where you see red's going to be supply water, or water that's going to be ready to do work. Blue will be return. That's having been through a process, having heated something, and on its way back to the boiler. What I'm showing here right now is your boiler manufacturer will tell you where you need to pipe from. They will say pipe from here or pipe from there, so on and so forth. But most times, my opinion, I'm going to tell you to pull from the bottom. That's right. I said most of the time you're going to want to take the boiler water from the bottom of the boiler. Now, before y'all tell me I'm crazy and that I'm a fool and you just canceled your subscription, let me tackle that one. Now, so this is a vented system, so this is going to apply to a vented system. One reason, first of all, again, whatever your boiler manufacturer tells you to do, if he says pipe, if they say pipe it from down here and run that way and return back to the top, do that. If they say pull from the top, going this way and return back to the bottom with your pump up here, pushing that way, do that. I'm just going to give you some food for thought that will hopefully make you look at a situation and ask yourself the question, where would I put the pump and why would I want to put the pump there? So let's say the boiler manufacturer doesn't necessarily tell you, or you've got no guidance as to what to do. We're going to talk more in the future about heat exchange, but where do you think the hottest part of this firebox is? Raise your hand if you think the hottest part is down here, or let me draw an exhaust fan. Okay, so what we have, water, 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 water. Okay, and this water is actually going all the way around this. It's just a cutaway. So where's the hottest part? Is it here? Typically, you think, oh, well, the coals are there, but especially if you got multiple passes in here, this is where it's the hottest. It's hotter up here. You know, if you got secondary combustion happening, you know, you got your little flames that are lighting off again here, which is good. That's what we're looking for. We'd love to have secondary combustion. So it's going to be, you know, most times it's going to be hotter up here than down here. Not to say you can't stick your hands in those coals and not get burnt, but if you're hotter up here, I would like, remember, we'll talk about counterflow. You want the hottest water, the hottest temperature of the boiler to be exposed to the coldest water, a counterflow. So we bring the return water in here. So doing it this way, one reason why you might want to do this is because you're going to have better heat transfer. Basically, the temperature differences between the water you're trying to heat and the fire that you're trying to heat it with, counterflow arrangements keeps that difference between the two highest for the longest amount of time. So if we had just a little quick, let's say I've got 2 blocks of copper, and this is 100 degrees Celsius, and that's 100 degrees Celsius. How much heat transfer, how much heat does this block of copper, and they're touching, they're machined and they're smooth touching each other. How much heat transfer is going to happen? 0. They're at the same temperature. So I have no delta T between these two. In this situation, 0. So heat transfer is 0. But what if this is 300 Celsius? Okay, how much heat transfer? Well, we'll definitely have heat transfer, and it's going to transfer this way, right? And we'll say this is Q1. That's heat transfer rate of this scenario. Okay, and then if we took that and made that 800, right? We're still transferring heat in this way because it's higher energy on this side than that side. So our Q in that situation is even bigger, however I want to write that. So that's Q2. That's the heat transfer rate. You'll see Q is heat transfer rate. You'll run into that a lot. So Q2, the rate is much larger than Q1, just because the difference between them, the delta T got bigger. So the bigger gap you can get between what you're trying to heat versus what you're trying to heat it with, you want that gap to be as big as possible with certain considerations for as long as possible. So a counterflow arrangement, you know, that keeps your delta as big as possible for longer. Now, that's one reason why you might want to do this. And you don't always want to do this. I'm just trying to give you some situations where you may want to think about it. We're going to do a video about pumps at some point, but we'll give just a little snippet here. So what pressure do we see here? You know, what pressure is right there? Well, we've just got the weight of the water on it, right? Because this is open, it's vented. This can't establish anything higher than atmospheric pressure. So if this distance, I'm just going to say, if this is 10 feet, right? That'd be a giant boiler. That's way too big. If the pump's right at the boiler. Let's say this is 5 feet. Okay, the suction side of that pump, the most it can ever see is 5 feet, or 5 feet of head at the suction. Okay, depending on your runs, your runouts going like this, you know, you may have to go like a really long way, and that's fine. You get big pumps, bigger pipe. You can, pump miles and miles. We do that all the time with large campuses. You have a utility plant somewhere, and you'll pump the water a long way away, college campuses. But it's important because every pump from every manufacturer on the planet will have a requirement for this inlet side or the suction side, and that is NPSH. And you can denote it R, but that's net positive suction head required. Well, you may not have that net positive suction head available if you pull it from up here, right? If you pull the pump from here, and that's, let's say that's 6 inches, that distance where the pipe's coming out to, if you pull from the top, yeah, that water's hotter. It's definitely hotter. And that's why most people say, oh, definitely take it from the top, but that's the hottest water. Yeah, but how much head is over that pump? Meaning there's only 6 inches of water. So that's 6 inches of head at the suction. Depending on how much you have to flow that way, depending on your pipe size and stuff like that, most of the time that's going to start causing you problems because you don't have enough net positive suction head. So just some food for thought for you. Like I said, some manufacturers are going to tell you one thing, somebody else may say another. This is Mike and Mono's opinion on why sometimes you would want this to be down. It'll depend on what you're pumping, how far you're pumping, you know, what size pipe you have to use. That's whatever you had available. But there is something that those pump manufacturers will tell you, and it is called net positive suction head required. That is a requirement. And depending on your situation, if you pull from up here, you're probably not going to have that. And you can get pump cavitation and you can destroy the pump. But just some stuff to think about. There's times where you want it to be up here. You may be all downhill. Your boiler may be 300 yards and 100 feet down a hill in a valley, and you're pumping the water up here. All of that changes. The elevations of equipment on a vented system. But that's 2 reasons why you potentially want to be pulling from the bottom. Counterflow, the water coming back this way is going to be colder, and it's going to be exposed to the hottest point, and so that temperature gradient is going to be the highest for the longest amount while inside that boiler. Better heat transfer. Now it's not going to be night and day difference, like, oh my gosh, I cut my wood supply in half. But that's one reason. It's a higher delta T of the water and the firebox temperature. And the other reason is you might not have enough suction head for your circulating pump if you pull from the top there. The water will be hot, but you might not be able to move it because your pump's cavitating. So, yeah, some food for thought. Think about it. Tell me what you think. Hey, just want to take a chance to thank everybody for watching. If you haven't subscribed, first of all, ask yourself, do you like this type of content? If you do and you want to see more of it and you would like to give input as to, hey, I'd like to really see this or really see that, please consider subscribing. It doesn't cost you anything. It really, really, really helps with justifying what we're doing. Each of these videos, you're talking about maybe an hour and a half of filming, an hour and a half of editing. I think that we're going to bring a lot of value to it. I am someone that does heating and air conditioning for a living. I support my family by doing it. I've got a lot of experience with it. So I know on the channel we're going to talk a lot primarily about wood heat and stuff like that, but as the time goes on in the future, we may talk more about, hey, heat pumps, how do heat pumps work, or gas furnaces, oil furnaces, controls. I do think that I bring a lot to the table on that. I've seen a lot of channels, and you don't see very often, at least, content creators that actually do this for a living. Like I said, I am a licensed mechanical contractor. I've worked around residential, commercial, big equipment, very big systems. So please consider subscribing. That would really, really help us. We want to do this and keep moving forward, and building a subscriber base like folks like y'all really helps us to do that. And when it comes time for, we like to do some giveaways in the future. We don't have the money for that right now, but we're working towards it. We want to do some giveaways. And like I said, there's been a lot of people already that have asked for certain content, and I make a list of that. I keep track of all that, and so any of that that's coming from subscribers, that's at the top of the list. Because it takes a lot to make these videos, at least for me, because trying to juggle this with my family life and work life. But if you like this content and you want to see more, hey, do us a favor, hit subscribe. Like I said, it doesn't cost you anything. If after a month or two you really just get tired of this sort of stuff, just unsubscribe. But it really does help us, and it doesn't cost you anything to do it. So we appreciate it. Please consider subscribing. So when the pump comes on, it's moving water around. It's going to your house. Most of the time, this portion of piping is underground. I hope it's underground and it's not just running out on your yard. You definitely lose a lot of heat that way. But this is going to make its way into an air duct plenum most of the time. It could go to radiant in-floor heat if you had radiant in-floor heat with a manifold, stuff like that. But let's pretend for now that this is just in a duct system, and your thermostat is just controlling this fan. Whenever your house gets cold, the fan comes on, it pulls air across that coil. Let me say, depending on the situation, but let's just say 70 degrees, air coming in. Hello, kitty, go away. This cat is hell-bent on getting on this video. So thermostat says I need heat, brings a blower on. This hot water was moving around that coil most of the time, and this air may be, it'll depend on your setup and your flows and the temperatures of your air and water combined, but let's just say 110. So it warms up, your house satisfies, your thermostat says I'm good, and it's just a blower off. So this is what I would consider a conventional open system that is only heating the house. All right, so this is what I would consider a conventional outdoor wood boiler, open system, and we're going to add domestic hot water heating with a sidearm heat exchanger. So somewhere in your house you have a domestic water heater. I'm not showing the cold water in and the hot water out to the fixtures just to try to clean this up. So it's something like this. Then you would buy and pipe fit sidearm heat exchanger, and it looks something similar to this on the outside. Really what it is on the inside, if I can draw this, is it's basically like a tube inside of a tube. I don't know if that does it justice, but this is water from the domestic water side in here. And the outside of this jacket, you know, if you're looking at it vertically, it's like that. The domestic water is in here, and the boiler water is out here. And they're traveling past each other, giving up heat from the boiler water to the domestic water. Now, this is a highly hot button topic that, depending on who you're asked, they're going to say one thing, somebody else is going to say another. First thing, I would always recommend hooking up to your domestic water heat. If this is your setup, just like this is a single loop. If you're only going to have a single loop like this, go to your domestic water heater first. Regardless of what type of heat exchanger you have, if someone's taking a shower and is heating the water, you're not going to notice it. When this is running, if it's giving up heat to this water, yes, this water coming out, coming out of the boiler, it's say 180 degrees. If it's giving up heat to here, this water will be something less than that. It has to be. If it's giving up heat to your domestic water, it has to be colder. So let's just say in this situation, it's 170. Making numbers up just for even multiples of 10, but the water will go into the sidearm heat exchanger, out of the sidearm heat exchanger, and then carry on to your heat. So putting your domestic water heater first in the loop. Again, this is a single loop, one pump, single loop. If someone's taking a shower and you're heating water, you're not going to notice it in the house unless someone's taking like a 4-hour shower, and then your house may start getting behind. But always put this first. Just trust me. Now, with this heat exchanger, there's going to be another video. I'm going to do another video specifically about heat exchangers, coax, plate frame, sidearm heat exchangers. You're always going to want a counterflow situation. So really, if you look at it like this, you've got a cold fill line that goes down here. That's the cold water in from your well or city. So that cold water is down here. The hot water is at the top. So this water is cold. This water is going to move in this direction. As it gets warmer, this 180 degree water in this jacket going around is going to heat this water up. And that's going to want to rise because it's becoming less dense the hotter it's getting. So it will start to rise and goes up. So the water from the water heater side is going up. The water from the boiler side is, in this situation, going down. But basically, the thing to remember is with heat exchangers, 99.99 times out of 100, you need counterflow, meaning like that. The cold water here, this medium, is going this way, and the boiler water is going that way. Like I said, I'm going to do a video on heat exchangers. And we'll talk a lot more in depth about counterflow versus parallel flow. You could go out into the industry right now and 1,000 people are going to tell you the hot water needs to go in the bottom to start a thermosiphon. Like I said, I do a lot of work commercial. Now I'm 100% commercial now with work. And we use heat exchangers all the time. And I've rarely seen a scenario where going parallel flow, which would be like that, the cold and the hot running side by side, it will rarely ever net you better heat transfer. So in general, when in doubt, always pipe counterflow with any kind of heat exchanger. That's air to water, water to water, oil to oil. So what happens here? A sidearm heat exchanger is a very slow recovery. It's not a fast process. It's not going to take 60-degree well water and instantly turn it into 110-degree water for your fixtures. It's not. So sidearm heat exchangers are used during an off cycle. So while nobody's taking showers, this is slowly going to recharge this domestic tank. And that process, basically this water here warms. As it warms, it wants to rise, it goes to the top, and you have this process that goes around in a circle, natural convection, and that is actually called thermosiphon. Well, let me spell it right. So it will literally move the cold water, heat it, put it in there over time. So depending on how big your water heater is, depending on the capacity of your heat exchanger, depending on how hot your boiler water is, but it'll recharge it over time. And obviously when you start taking showers, you're going to deplete that water just like you would normal, because that sidearm heat exchanger is not going to recover that fast. But there's a benefit to a sidearm heat exchanger. But yeah, hot water from the boiler, my recommendation, come in the top and have the outlet on the bottom, and then it will carry on, go to your forced air coil, through the coil, it'll give up heat, go back to the boiler to be reheated. Okay, so this is still the conventional open system with domestic hot water heating. In this situation, we're going to be using a plate frame heat exchanger followed by the sidearm heat exchanger we talked about earlier. I did kind of erase some of this stuff in the middle. I'm trying to clean this up. I know there's a lot going on here, but here is the plate frame heat exchanger. And this is basically just a bunch of stacked plates that allow water to pass. Boiler water passes on this channel, domestic cold water passes on this channel, and they're just stacked. And so they give up heat. The boiler gives up heat to the domestic water, but the two water systems are isolated. They're separated, which is good because, we should have chemistry in here. If you don't do chemistry, it's just asking for trouble. But, so how this works, I tried to draw it like this because I wanted to really drive home this whole concept of counterflow. So the boiler water would come in here in this, and it would go through the heat exchanger and come out here and continue on its way. Whereas the cold water from the well would come in here, go into this side of the heat exchanger, pass through, and come out and go, sorry, I had to cross that line, but it basically would go into the cold inlet of your water heater. Now, so you see we have counterflow, always counterflow. The hot water is going this direction, the cold water from the well is going that way. Now, plate frame heat exchangers are very high output. you're talking about something that may be this big, just like half the size of a shoebox, that could take 60-degree water and be spitting out 135-degree water. So what size plate frame heat exchanger do you need? Depends on how many showers do you want to carry at once, live. I mean, I would say a minimum would be well, I guess I could say a minimum would be a 10 plate. That's probably going to be small for most of your families if you have a lot of people. I would probably recommend a 20 plate is going to cover a lot of bases. You got to be careful because these plate frame heat exchangers can be have such high output, you can outrun your boiler and get really cold water going back, and that's not good. So your size depends on what your needs are. But basically what happens, let's look at the boiler water side first. We talked about the counterflow. The boil, if no water is running, no domestic hot water is being used, there's no water moving on the domestic side. So what will happen is the boiler water won't have anything to give up heat to because this is stationary. So no showers happening. Basically the heat transfers through that plate flame heat. Ugh. If nobody's using hot water, the heat transfer in this plate frame heat exchange is very little, almost nothing. You'll have some radiant losses and stuff like that. But basically the boiler water will go in, and in effect, it's not really going to give up any heat because there's no movement of water on the domestic side. So let's just say it's 180 coming out. It'll go into your sidearm heat exchanger, like we talked about before, and it'll just be charging your domestic water tank. And it will come out of there and go on. So I've got 170 written right here. That's probably way too high. If it's coming in at 180 to that sidearm heat exchanger, I mean, it may be 175, 100. It's not a big temperature drop because remember that sidearm heat exchanger is it's a relatively low capacity. It does its work over time. So yeah, it goes in 180, comes out 175, goes to your coil. If your furnace or air handling unit, whatever, turns the fan on because you need heat, gives you heat. That water will get cold in that heat exchanger, going back to the boiler to get reheated. So that's the boiler side of things, with no domestic water being used. Now let's say that mama bear and your daughters are taking a shower. Well, flow through here will be fairly substantial. You may be 3 or 4 people are taking showers. You know, this may be 5-6 gallons a minute, but we'll have some flow. And so that cold water from your well goes into that heat exchanger. Let's say it's going in at 60, and I'm saying 135 degrees. That number is very arbitrary. It depends on how big the plate frame heat exchanger is and how much water flow is going through there. But it'll be coming out ideally hot if you've sized everything correctly. And then it'll go in, and it'll go into the bottom of the water heater. And as you're using water, hot water that is, it will just keep putting hot water into your water heater. So this is charging your water heater in real time, high capacity, while you're using hot water. So theoretically, you'll never run out of hot water unless you run the well dry. So that's how this will work. Hopefully that makes sense. I did want to stress the importance of a mixing valve. This is very, very important. The water coming out of this water heater, depending on how big your plate frame heat exchanger is, depending on your boiler water temperature, the water that comes out of this will be very hot, dangerously hot, scalding hot. So before that gets sent to the house, I'm going to draw it over here. This would be the hot coming out of the water heater. Right. I'm only going to draw the hot, but this water could be, good gracious, I mean, it could be 150 degrees, 180 degrees. It could be hot, because over time your sidearm is going to heat this up to whatever your boiler water is. So this could be devastating hot. So you must, I'm going to tell you, you must have a mixing valve. Don't not put one in because, oh, we'll just know that you got to be careful. Do not do this without a mixing valve. And a three-way mixing valve, basically, this would be cold from the house. I sure hope this is showing up on camera. That would be cold water from your house. That's going to be hot water from the boiler, well, actually from your water heater, sorry. And this is going to go out to your fixtures. Your mixing valve you'll set is adjustable to control your temperature. And, you know, something modest and safe. 125 is kind of high, but, you know, let's say you adjust this to 120. So no matter how hot this water is coming out of this tank, and it will get hot. If you've done this right, and this is set up right, a good install, man, it will scream, and you're gonna love it. But that water will be devastatingly hot. But it'll come out, no matter how hot this water is, it will either back off and close off the hot. It'll just be constantly blending and tempering to a controlled temperature. Very important. Mixing valve. So yeah, that's a general setup for a conventional open system with a sidearm heat exchanger that was preceded by a plate frame heat exchanger. All right, so this is my current setup. So what I have, as we saw in the last video, we have a MBTEK Uni-15 wood boiler. It is a pressurized system, so it does have high pressure safeties. When you have a pressurized system, temperature changes in the water, like between off cycles and stuff like that, that water volume can contract. It can expand when it heats. So closed loop, you got to have an expansion tank. So I'm sorry about the layout. This is obviously not what it looks like at my house, but this is how it's piped in. I'll try to just go as best order as I can. So let's just do it. All right, so this is a primary pump here. I'm pumping to the boiler, which is different than what I did on the open system. There's definitely be a lot of explaining, but because of how I wanted this safety zone to work and give me heat during normal operation, I did it that way. So basically return water comes into the boiler, goes through the boiler, and gets heated. So right here at the boiler is a high pressure safety, pressure relief. That one is set at 25 pounds. So it will open if the pressure in the system, or at least as it's experiencing right there, it will open if the pressure gets above that. So if you look at just this portion for now, this basically comes out, goes up under the ground to my house, and as it comes up under the house, I got a check valve, I've got a T and a 1-inch valve. That's for a future. I'll explain that in just a second. Then I have, obviously this is shown very big here relatively speaking, but this is a low loss header. In commercial applications, you would call that a decoupling bridge. Because my system, I have two pumps. I've got a pump here, that's the primary side or the boiler side. And then I have a pump over here, and that is the secondary side or my house side, the load side. Basically, once the water gets up to temperature here in the boiler, this pump's going to come on first, and it's literally going to just start moving water around this way. So this is open. Now, it's a low loss header. Like I said, I'm going to maybe do a video about that. I don't know. You can just Google what a low loss header is, or a decoupling bridge. Decoupling bridge. This is basically just, you can think of it as like a T and a T that are right beside each other. I mean, in real life, you're talking about, you know, if this is, that is a terrible looking T. Whoa, 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 whoa. Now it's all crooked. It's all crooked now. The water's not going to flow right. So, we're going to fix this. T. And you've got, I mean, a tiny little piece of pipe here. Tiny. And by tiny, I mean very short. But if this is 1 inch, and that's 1 inch, and this is 1 inch, and that's 1 inch, this would be like 1.5 inches to 2 inches. Massively large. The idea is you want this bridge to basically offer no pressure drop. So this, don't let this fool you in the video. It's not a big giant long thing that's that long and a 1/2 inch. It's basically oversized T's really close together. And that allows water to be decoupled, meaning this loop doesn't feel this loop. So here we go. Let's try this again. So we have flow that's going this way. Now I have constant speed pumps. If you had variable speed pumps, say with like zoned radiant in-floor heat, you may have variable speed and this changes. In my situation, I've got fixed speed, and circuits just open or close. So basically I'm always moving water some amount right there. And the amount depends on what's happening on this side. So here's my secondary pump. This is my house side. That's a secondary pump there. Once the hot water from the boiler has made it to this point, it's measuring temperature right here, actually. Once this water gets a certain temperature and gets warm, that pump's going to come on. And it's going to start moving water on this side. If my house is not calling for heat, the thermostat is not going to be saying I need heat. It's not going to be bringing my blower on. And this valve, this is a 120 volt valve right here, it will be closed. So water can only go this direction right now. So what I'm getting ready to talk about is a no heat situation. I'm just heating domestic water. So what will happen is there's no flow going through that coil heat exchanger. That's a water to air heat exchanger. Water will only be going here. And practice what you preach. So my plate frame heat exchanger is first. It goes into the heat exchanger, out of the plate frame heat exchanger, into the sidearm, out of the sidearm heat exchanger, and comes back. So if this is not being used, if I'm not heating my house, water's going like this, through the plate frame heat exchanger, through the sidearm heat exchanger, and back like that. Now, what happens when you have heat going on at the same time? Well, when my house thermostat says I need heat, it'll turn the fan on and it will open this valve. So flow will be right here in this direction. Let me just try to throw some general flows in there with this going and both primary and secondary running. Let's say this is 6 gallons a minute here. Okay, so by default, that means that this is 6 gallons per minute. This way, coming back. This may be, let's say 4.5 going into the heat exchanger for my heat because the thermostat is asking for it. And this is going to be 1 GPM. It's actually probably closer to 2. And I'm just throwing numbers out here. I've got the data wrote down about where I'm kind of clocking right now. So 1 gallon a minute is going right there. So that means 1 gallon a minute. That's 1 gallon a minute. So I have 1 gallon a minute right here. That's 4.5 gallons a minute. That means that's 4.5 gallons per minute coming out of the coil. This marries together. So right here we have 5.5 gallons per minute, which means I have a 0.5 gallon a minute going through the bridge. So I got a 0.5 gallon a minute mixing with the 5.5 gallons a minute. I'm back to 6 gallons a minute, so on and so forth. That's just throwing numbers out there. That's pretty close though, as far as the flows. You know, I typically target around 6.5 when the heat's going and the air. When the heat in the house is going, I'm typically moving more water through this heat exchanger. Actually, that's wrong. I know that's not 4.5. That's actually only about 2 gallons per minute. So that's 2. And that's 2. So 2 gallons a minute going in here. 2's coming out of that. 2's here. So I'm 4 right here. So I got 2 going in there. 2 coming out. That's 4. Not 5.5. 4 here, which means I got 2 there. Okay, so generally that's kind of the flows and the way it works. I've got 3 air vents. I've got 1 on this coil here in the duct system. I've got 1 on the top of at the high point of the domestic water heater. And I've got 1 out here in the building. So let's talk about this for just a second. So in the building where the boiler is, I'm using this for heat. So I can heat my building. If I'm out there doing work or working on a chainsaw or something, I don't want to be cold. I have an air vent up top. So basically this valve is automated. So the thermostat in the building, when it says I'm cold, basically it will open that valve, turn that blower on, and it puts heat in the building. And so that return water comes down and marries with this return water to go back into the boiler. This is the dump zone though. Its most important job is if I have a high temp situation, so the water's just gotten hot for whatever reason, my failure. If I have electricity and everything's working great, and if the thermostats pick up on the fact that the water's gotten so hot, it will bring this heat on. It'll turn the fan on, open the valve, and let it go. Well, let's say I lose power. So the previous video I talked about it and showed there's a UPS power supply that's basically just hooked to that pump. So if I lose power in like an icing situation, this water could get really, really hot and sit there because the pumps are immediately going to shut off. In a power loss situation, the UPS powers that pump, and it opens that valve. So we talked about thermosiphon in the previous section in the water heater. Same concept here. This pump is going to flow for a while, and it's just going to push through. So this will all be off because my house is dark. There's no electricity. The only electricity I have at that moment is that UPS running this pump, and it will push the water here up through that, down, back, up, down, back, like that. Eventually the UPS will die and no longer produce power, but thermosiphon, the same thing that we're capitalizing on here, will cause that hot water to rise, come up here into the top of the coil, cool off, because this is going to be outside. The heat won't be on, the building's kind of chilly. It will give up heat to the air in the building, and it will just thermosiphon like that. So let's see, that's pretty straightforward. But yeah, plate frame heat exchanger, we talked about that. Sidearm heat exchanger, decoupling bridge, that's something new we've not talked about. We said the need for an expansion tank with a closed system. And yeah, I hope that makes sense. All right, everybody. Yins did really good. You stuck with me through all that. We talked a lot today about different setups and different arrangements, different components. We hope you liked that. It was a lot of fun for me. A little bit of information for y'all. I do want to reiterate that, you know, when I'm talking about a lot of this stuff, I have plans to do specific videos, detailed videos about small subjects. Like this video will be about heat exchangers, or this video may be about water storage as it pertains to wood boilers. So, you know, videos like this, I'm trying to be kind of broad and give you some nuggets of information. Like I said earlier, this isn't be all end all that's going to work in every single situation that's out there. Every situation is different. Every house is different. Every homeowner is different. People's needs are different. What do you have to work with? What kind of budget are you on? How much time do you have to devote to setting all of this stuff up? So I wanted to just remind everybody that, like I said, these are my thoughts, and I'm trying to throw out sound information. If I'm putting it on these videos, you can take it to the bank that it's not just something that I'm just throwing out there because I heard somebody say it once upon a time. I'm a facts junkie. You know, if someone says, "Oh, you should always do it like this," okay, great. Well, why? Why would you do it like that? And you know, a lot of times, unfortunately, stuff gets turned around out there in the world and passed on, and no one stops to think about why do we do this? And there are some people that say do it this way or do that way, and they'll give you a reason for it, and it's a scientific based in fact that there is a benefit to doing it this way versus that way in this given situation. But every situation is different. Every piece of equipment is different. Every home is different. You know, where I live versus where you live. You know, I live in the South. It gets cold, but it ain't the kind of cold that, you know, up north that y'all have. I mean, there ain't no sense in that. That's just too dang cold. I've been there, and I don't want to live there. But your house versus my house, how my house is built, how your house is built, how big is your equipment, a lot goes into it. So just take all of this with a grain of salt, as this is information I hope to kind of get in people's heads rolling around. You know, I'm sure a lot of y'all are just homeowners that are trying to learn more. Maybe I want to learn more about the system that I had installed for me. Maybe your installing contractor didn't do a lot of hands-on to give you a lot of information. I know I throw wood in these things, and this thing comes on, and that thing comes on, and hey, my house is warm. So there's a lot of people, they're just trying to build knowledge from very basic. There might be some people out there that do this for a living, and maybe I can throw something out there that maybe one of their coworkers or supervisors or their team leads or superintendents, whoever that they've worked with, might not have explained certain things to them. I hope that I can bring something to it. Everybody that knows me has always told me that I have the heart of a teacher, and I've always had that role in life. I tend to draw people that ask a lot of questions, because I am one of those people. I ask a lot of questions. So I hope you guys like this. I hope everybody has a good week. Take care of yourself, your family. Drive safe. Don't be crazy out there. We appreciate y'all stopping by again. We'll do it again sometime. Remember, if it ain't broke, it ain't ours.